Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the celebration of life for Steve Lingenfelter. I see all the orange out there and all the Scotty stuff, and I'm thinking the celebration of life's a lot better than a funeral. You know, I think when I die, I want to have one of these. So I'm Lyle Lingenfelter, Steve's nephew. And first, I guess I would just ask that everyone bow their heads and we'll open with a prayer. Lord God, I am regularly comforted with your instructions to trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not on our own understanding. I know we don't have to have a complete understanding. We're called to trust in you. And we trust that your mercy endures forever. We trust that your plans are better than our plans. We trust that you love us more than we're capable of understanding. I ask that you would comfort everyone here who is and will be missing Steve. I ask that you bring fond memories of Steve to mind and help people be able to share those memories. I ask that you bless us with wisdom to handle all the thoughts and questions that inevitably come to mind. And I just ask that you calm our emotions and help us to enjoy our time together remembering Steve. In Jesus' name, amen. I did want to mention one thing. I spoke to Chris the other day, and she said that Steve talked to God. He wasn't a typical believer, and he wanted answers. I'm glad you laughed, because it's hard for me to get through this sometimes. Chris thanked me before I came up here, and I said, I think she did that just so I wouldn't bolt. But it reminded me of the person who told Jesus, I believe, help my unbelief. And I think that may be the best type of believer, somebody who recognizes their weakness and knows that we have to rely on Jesus. We have to rely on God to fill us and make us complete. And so again, I thank you all for coming, and I do hope it is a good celebration today. And we have the good memories, and don't think too much on missing him, because I think he'll be doing well.
I brought props. Yeah, just drag a chair over anyway. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Oh. Get my glasses because I'm old now. Okay. So, there you go. All right. Thank you. I really wanted to write a fabulous eulogy for my dad. I'm a writer. He loved what I wrote. But I just couldn't do it. At 2 o'clock in the morning last night, I realized that just wasn't going to happen. I told my daughters yesterday, I got to write my eulogy. I was going to get up this morning, go write my eulogy. Didn't do it. There was so much to do. I was like, man, funerals are like weddings, huh? There's like all these things you got to do and all these people you got to talk to and all this stuff. And it's just been a whirlwind with my dad this last month. And it's hard for me to even wrap my head around that it's only been a month. And month and a half, I guess now. So, I have some things that I just kind of, and it's actually fitting because my dad was the kind of person that had notes all over. So he gave me his ADD. I've passed it on to a few of my children. So it is fitting that I don't have it all written down or organized. It is fitting that I'm coming up here with a stack of things. But I just don't think that there's any way I can capture how lucky I was to have my dad. For the longest time, it was just me and him. Us against the world. Sometimes us against each other. We had some really, my grandmother used to call them knockdown dragouts. We had them. But one of the very first thing I realized when my dad died, no one will ever love me the way he did. No one. It's impossible. In the last month of his life, I started calling him Daddy again. I haven't called him Daddy since I was a little girl. But I was blessed that I had that month with him, that I could call him Daddy and remember that he was my daddy, even though I am 55 years old. He was my daddy. And he was my mom, too. If you know me, if you know our story, you know that my dad was one of the first fathers to get sole custody of a kid in the early 70s. And he raised me. And so he was like both parents to me. And he gave everything for me. And one of the last things he told me a couple days before he died was he was so sorry that he had been to all the races and all the sporting events and missed out on so much of my childhood, he said. And I was like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. We spent so much time together. And I said, oh my gosh, do you know what it was like to have a parent, a father, who had so many passions? One of my friends wrote to me and said, your dad had the talent of 10 people, and he had the drive of no one I've ever known. And I told him what an example that was, to see how much he loved his teaching his students, to see how much he loved his photography, the things that he did in this life. Boys State just ended. One of his friends wrote to me and said, Boys State's here, I'm thinking about your dad. My dad was a counselor there for a few decades. You know, like, he did all of these things, and he never did anything half-assed, ever. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, you know? And so I wanted to just kind of share some things. First of all, is it raining out? Or was it raining?
Slightly. It's like thinking about raining.
So the week before my dad passed, he was insisting that it was raining in Arizona. And we told him we're like, it's not raining. It's 130 degrees out, basically, and it's sunny, it's not raining. He's like, y'all are crazy. There's rain on the wind when the thing. The last time I talked to him was on Wednesday, June the 12th. The next morning, he had an incident, and we weren't able to talk to him again. I know he could hear us. But, we had our first cloudy day. And on the way to go see him, I stopped and took a picture of the sun barely peeking through the clouds. And then when we took him to the hospice facility that afternoon, and it rained. And I was like, well, look at you. You called it. So that was him. So one of the songs we had playing was Have You Ever Seen the Rain by Creedence Clearwater. So I want to read a poem, and I actually found this poem a few months ago. And I knew when I saw it that it was going to be what I would read today. And it's by someone I follow. Her name's Donna Ashworth. It's called The Loss of a Father. The loss of a father is the anchor pulled from the seabed, the steering wheel unhinged, the mast split by lightning, and the bow broken by the storm. The ship that you sail now feels unsafe, no longer weatherproof, without direction or brave heart to speed its way. Perhaps you did not know that he was your compass, that you gazed upon his lead like a north star in the night. He gave you all of this, you see, without notice or congratulation, diligently, consistently, continuously guiding, always showing the way in the best way he knew how. And while you are cast adrift, I know this to be true. You will anchor yourself once more when you realize his voice still speaks and still guides you. It still brings a brave heart your way in the roughest of storms. And the answers that you seek, he already planted deep, for he knew one day that you would need to sail alone. So he buried little pieces of himself within your heart, your mind, your spirit, and your soul. He left little breadcrumbs of love to show the way home. And he did. After my dad passed, I had cleaned out his apartment before when he was sick. And I already found breadcrumbs from him. I found breadcrumbs from my grandfather, his father. I found a book I gave him on the year anniversary of when my grandpa Dutch died. And I had written on here about how much I thought of Dutch when I read it and how lucky I was to have my grandpa Dutch as my grandfather and my dad as my dad. And it's called On Grieving the Death of a Father. And it was there for me. Something else he left me. If you remember the song Butterfly Kisses, about a father and daughter. It's a father-daughter journal, and I gave it to him in 1999, Father's Day, when I was pregnant with my oldest, Katie. And happy Father's Day, Dad. I love you. Always, Chris. He filled out his part. He did it. And he gave it back to me on Mother's Day of 2000. Happy first Mother's Day with Katie. Now it's your turn to write. I love you forever, Dad. He drew a little squiggly face. which I have tattooed on my arm now with the I love you forever, Dad. And I just wanted to share, because one of the things in here, and like Lyle said, my dad was not like a religious man by any means, but he left me 4 scriptures. These are scripture verses I have chosen for you. 1 Peter verse 9. Don't repay evil for evil. Don't snap back at those who say unkind things about you. Instead, pray for God's help for them, for we are to be kind to others, and God will bless us for it. 1 Peter verses 16 and 17. Do what is right, then if men speak against you, calling you evil names, they will become ashamed themselves for falsely accusing you when you have only done what is good. Remember, if God wants you to suffer, it is better to suffer for doing good than for doing wrong. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 and 27. If you are angry, don't sin by nursing your grudge. Don't let the sun go down with you still angry. Don't get over it quickly, for when you are angry, you give almighty foothold to the devil. And the last one, Hebrews 12:11. Being punished isn't enjoyable when it's happening. It hurts, but afterwards we can see the result, a quiet growth in grace and character. I wanted to talk about the don't go to bed angry thing. On the Tuesday before my dad died, my daughter and I were with him, and he was grumpy. I don't know if any of you probably can't imagine him being grumpy. He was really grumpy. And I had to go to the other room for a few times because it was hard. And my daughter ended up leaving a little bit early. He called me that night. It was the last time he called me. And he was crying. And he said, I just need to know before I go to sleep that we're okay. He said, I'm terrified of dying, and I'm taking it out on you. And I said, I understand. And I said, it's okay. When it happens, I'll just leave the room for a few minutes, and I'll get myself together, and I'll come back. I'll always come back. And he's okay. And then that's when I asked him, can we make a video of I'd like you to tell me about the day I was born. He's like, you don't remember it? I'm like, no, Dad, I don't remember it. And so he wanted to make sure that we did not go to sleep with that between us. And I went the next day and we made that video. And I also got to tell him the next day that someone very close to me had told me that his mother and that his uncle were there with him, and that they had been preparing a place for him, and that he didn't need to be afraid, that they were waiting for him. And he was crying, and he said, well, if they're here with me, who's with my brothers? And I said, well, Daddy, they're already on the other side. They're probably hanging out with your grandparents and everybody else. And he was calmed by that, and I left. And that was the last time I spoke to him. He texted me that night, and he told me that he loved us. He said, I love you, Spooky. That was their name for me. Him and Dwight and my grandfather, they called me Spooky, because I like to tell spooky stories when I was little. And I love you, Spook. I love all of you, with many heart emojis, many emojis. And that was it. And the next morning, they called to tell me that he'd had a seizure. So I want to let you all know that y'all are going to talk about his life, and I want to hear all the stories. But I want to tell you that when my dad died, he didn't do that half-assed either. When I told him who was waiting for him and that he didn't have to be afraid, that it was the next morning that he had that seizure, and he didn't ever wake up. He heard us because he would turn his head, but he never spoke to us again. He never opened his eyes again. And he went to the hospice home, and I was with him that night, and I had a conversation with my daughter, Katie, by my dad's bedside on the phone, and I said to her, honey, I think he's going to go tonight or tomorrow. If we can get it together, I'd really like to have his service on June 29th. June 29th, 1968, my Uncle Johnny died at the age of 16. That was my dad's youngest brother. He was the oldest. Dwight was the middle. Johnny was the baby. That changed my family forever. And Katie said, Mama, that would be perfect. He would love that. That's full circle. And my dad was a full circle kind of guy. And so I think he heard me, and I think he made that happen. And everything has fallen together for us to be here together today. I have this teddy bear here. It has St. Benedict's medal here with a cross. It's for safe travels. I gave this him his first day in the hospital in May. He had this with him every night. He died with this under his arm. So I sleep with it now. And I believe it has a little bit of a spirit in it. I want to let you all know that he's already talked to me. When my dad died, I was by myself, and a lot of you heard this story. I apologize. I'm old. I get to tell stories more than once. So, I was by myself on Friday, June the 14th. It was 2:25. I had not eaten. I ordered food because I was starving. And I was very upset because my dad was really agitated right up for a few minutes with that. I was able to get a hold of my Aunt Lynn. I put the phone to his ear so he could hear her say goodbye. 5 minutes after we hung up the phone, he stopped breathing. The nurse told me that he was gone, said his heart had stopped. I opened the patio door so that he would be free to go. And I went to hold his hand, and I felt a slight pulse. And so I asked the nurse, "Can you please check again?" "Oh, I will, sweetie, but he is gone. I'm sorry, but I will do that for you." She checked. "He has a pacemaker?" "Yeah." "Is it a defibrillator?" "No, just a regular pacemaker." "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. His heart just started again. I can't believe I put you through that. This has never happened to me." And I said, "Well, you don't know my dad." So, okay. And then he started breathing again. "All right, Daddy, I got you. I haven't eaten yet. You're right. Okay, I'm going to sit next to you. I'm going to eat some bread. I'll sit down here." And I said to her, "He's waiting for my husband to get here at 3. This was at 2:25. So my husband got there at 5 till 3. I told him what had happened. I said, I think he needs you to tell him that you're going to take care of me." So my husband, Brent, over here, went on one side of my dad's bed, and I was on the other. And Brent put one hand on my dad's forehead, on the other on his forearm. And he said, "It's all right, buddy. I love you. Thank you for sending Chris to me. I'm going to take care of her. You can go. You can go be with your brothers. It's okay. I've got this. We've got this now. You can rest." And my dad exhaled. And Brent said, "That's it. Let it go." And then he sucked in again like he was going to breathe again. And we both were like, "Are you doing this to us again?" But he did it. And we had Pandora on the TV. And the song that came on when my dad sucked in and then let out that last breath was John Denver, "Rocky Mountain High." And my dad took me to the Rocky Mountains when I was 8 years old. And he wants some of his ashes spread there, which we will do. And I just wanted to let you all know that he is with us, because I can tell you that when we went to pick up his enlargements from his friend Mick Orman here, I was telling Mick that story. And I said, John Denver was the first concert my dad ever took me to. And I said it was like 80, 81. He said, "Was it Holman Center?" "Yeah, it was at Holman Center." He said, "I was at that concert." "Were you?" "Yeah." He goes, "Oh my God, Chris, I have this picture that's been on my counter. That's my own collection that I was going to digitize or do something with. I've had it there since February. I keep moving it around. I never get to doing it. It's John Denver, and it's from that concert." So I was like, "Oh, hey, Dad." So I just want you to know he is here. I know that he's here. I know that he's with his family. I know that he's with his parents and his brothers. He missed them so much. And this all went really fast for him, and he handled it like a champ. He handled it like a champ. And when it was time to go, he didn't do that half-assed either. He just did it. And I just wanted you all to know that. And he loved all of you. He loved his students. He loved his friends. He loved his colleagues. He loved his children. He loved his nieces, his nephews, all of you. And when he realized he was going to be passing soon, I told him about all the tributes that had come in and how everyone loved him. And he said to me, "Well, then I guess what I did, what I was supposed to do when I was put on this earth." So I want you all to know that. And thank you. Thank you. And if anyone wants to hug the bear, you can.
All right. This is my first time doing one of these, and I felt really overwhelmed and compelled to do this. Actually, the day he passed. And just taking a second for my mom was saying there a moment ago. So, anyways, All right, so I'm Jacob. I'm the oldest of the four, I'm not the oldest. Sorry, Katie. I'm the oldest of the 2 grandsons. I'm the second oldest of his 4 grandkids. So it's Katie, myself, and Isaac, and then Abby, who's up front as well too. And today I brought my girlfriend Hannah as well, and she'll come into the story here in a little bit. So the night he passed, it was rough. I remember I was at my desk in my office, and I sat there, and I had a feeling that day it was going to happen. But that night, I did kind of what my mom would do, and I think what Steve would do as well too, which is write. And I wanted to write down some stuff. So I wrote the time. The last couple weeks, I was like, do I want to add anything or do some stuff? So this is, what I wrote about my grandfather and some things I want to share about him too, and some fun stories. Sorry about that. So Papa, as he was known between my siblings and I from day one. We never really called him Grandpa. Sometimes we'd call him Steve in jest. So, Steve was like, he's being a little angry at himself. We'd call him Steve, but otherwise we'd call him Papa. But he was always our Papa. I said, there's one thing I will cherish. It was always his unwavering support for my real estate career. Some of you guys might know I'm in real estate down in Phoenix where we live. And when I was 5, the story is basically we were walking around the neighborhood, walking the dog. And there was this house that I wanted to go check out the bathroom on. So we checked out the bathroom. It just kickstarted my drive. I watched tons of HGTV growing up and such. And he was always so supportive. I can't tell you how many times when we were I was 10 or 11 or 12, and we go look at model homes or furniture stores and whatnot. And he always enjoyed it. He never was upset by it. It was some of the most amazing memories of my childhood, actually, as I go into it. And it just, to this day, there are communities I'll drive by and I'll be like, oh, we looked at models there and whatnot. And it's always cool to see those little bits around my town and just kind of know, him and I'd go there and have those memories. But his encouragement, like I said, was always super, super positive. He never was ashamed of what I wanted to do. He was, even until the last couple of years, you can go on his Facebook. And, after he passed that night, I was on his Facebook because I wanted to just kind of relive some memories. And political posts aside, we could actually go down there and see some things that he had said. It was really heartwarming to just kind of look at them again. Some of my fondest memories are from these times as well. There was this one example about 10 years ago. We're in a kitchen of a house, and it had a pot filler. And I had never seen a pot filler in my life. I don't know if everyone knows what a pot filler is. It's that little faucet above the range stove area. And we turned it on. We flooded half the kitchen doing it. And he was probably a little, I don't want to say alarmed by it, but he was definitely a little shook up by it. Oh. We got it cleaned up, dried up, and the sales gal was very nice. But, it just was little things like that. Going back to the Facebook things, there's a photo of me with these big glasses that were on display in one of the houses. They were decor glasses. They weren't real glasses. And it's just the fact that he just loved my passion for that too as well, and shared a passion for me with it. We'd look at old houses like Craftsman's and bungalows, which in Arizona don't exist because everything's stucco there. But driving to here today, it was cool to see actually those types of houses. Another story I want to share about him as well too was actually from the Sunday before he passed. So this would have been 3 weeks ago tomorrow. Road America was on. So he was adamant first off that the race had happened the week before. I said, no, this is the live race, and I wanted to watch some IndyCar with him too. I'm very fortunate that I shared IndyCar with him, and then also my father, who is not his son, but on the other side of my family there. And Road America was on. It was at the end, and Will Power won that race. And anyone that knows my grandfather or knew him knew he absolutely despised Penske and Ganassi teams with a passion, just a knot. So we're sitting there, and yeah, he was in one of his moods. He never did, as everyone knows. He never got in a mood or a funk, but he had to give a few different double birds to Will Power TV. And as angry as he was, I was still laughing there because that is just the character I knew of him at times, and just some funny moments. And it reminded me, Will Power actually infamously about 15 years ago gave a couple double birds to TV. So I don't know, maybe it was his thing back to him. Regardless. Actually, I had another story I want to share as well too. So a few days ago, this past Tuesday, so this is a week and a half after he passed, I was in a meeting with some of my colleagues, and I had this gal come up to me, a really nice gal named Julie. In a past life, she was an elementary school teacher. So she had seen, she's Facebook friends with me, the post about his passing that I put out the day he had passed, and that he was a fellow educator. Like I said, she was an elementary school teacher, he obviously being art and computers as well. And it really touched me when we were just kind of talking about it for a few minutes. I didn't expect anything of anyone to come, up to me that day, but she was talking about, how the importance of a teacher is and how a great man he was. And I think a lot of what I want to talk about here in my eulogy today, in my speech here, is just how many people, between you guys, anyone watching today, that he, touched on in some regard as far as teachers or colleagues or students. It doesn't matter. It's been really heartwarming to see that, to say the least. And I want to touch on that again here, like I said, as I'm standing here. And it just, like I said, it was really heartwarming. All the comments online and everything, and seeing different posts and pictures, even as I walked in here today and on the slideshow that Katie made, my sister, just seeing everyone's kind of different pictures and memories with him. It was really sweet to see that. Even last night before bed, I was looking at it again. I cannot lie there. I do have one other memory I want to share that really kind of connected with me. This happened actually the day he went in the hospital, May 14th. So it's a Tuesday night. We actually went to go, Hannah and my girlfriend, to let his dog out. And Maggie, as some of you guys know, she's a super lovable dog. I know most of you probably haven't met her physically, but she is just a sweet lovable dog. A total ditz, like all of his dogs in some, right? But she is super, super, super awesome. And I'm very thankful to hear that I know that she's with me. We took her in that night, just with the living situation she was in, and him being in the hospital. It was like, let's just take her. And she's been doing awesome. So if anyone wants to see me after, we have pictures of Maggie, trust me. But she's doing great. But back to kind of at the ER. So we were there, and it was tough. I honestly hadn't seen my grandfather in a few months. And we were talking and, whatnot. I was stepped out for a minute on the outside of the curtain. It was like a full room to talk to my mom for about some stuff. And Hannah, who we had never met before, at this point midday for about 5 months, had just stepped in to talk with him too. So they're talking, and I come back in, and they're laughing or whatnot. I was like, what are you guys talking about? So what essentially had happened, he basically explained to her, kind of knowing her or whatnot. He was like, you remind me of a former student I have, and she was a stripper. And which caught us off guard. And of course, it's like the very eye roll, like what comment that he would make, and very unfiltered. And it's totally hilarious. Her and I, it's an inside joke that we use constantly. And no, Hannah's not a stripper. Not then, not now, hopefully not ever. She's going to school for interior design in the fall, so not a little bit away from the adult entertainment, comfort. Anyways, but you get the idea. She's not a stripper, so. But yeah, like I said, that was a story that it just at the end of his life, he was still doing stuff like that too. Another thing I'll say is, like a week before he's passing, Hannah, Abby, and I were over when he first moved into the group home. So he went to hospice the last couple of days of his life. Then he was in a group home for about a week and a half before. And we're in there, and we're just making snarky comments with him. And that's Steve at his best. It's just making snarky comments with him and giving him a hard time and him giving us a hard time. And I always love and cherish him for that too, because I think probably deep down that's where I got a lot of that. Abby, definitely. So going back to Maggie for a little bit as well too. So Maggie, like I said, was the last dog that he had. He's had her for about 3.5 years. I took her in, total ditz. Like I said, she cannot sit still. Like you try to pet her or kiss her, and she'll just start jerking her head all the way around. But she is such a lovable partner of a dog, and I know that he cherished her dearly, as he did all his dogs as well too. And like I said, she's back in Arizona. She's playing with her rope toy. We got a video of her yesterday. She was running around enjoying the house. So she is doing wonderfully. And I will say, when he passed, it was really good to just kind of look at her, because I think she was actually sitting next to me when I found out. Or go out in the living room and just see her. But Maggie's an awesome dog. So if anyone was curious about a little Maggie update, she's doing wonderful. But I do want to end this off with a couple other things that I just, when I wrote down here as far as when I was writing out what I wanted to say today here. Steve Link, Papa, Dad, Mr. Lingenfelter, Link, whatever you called him, he always had some weirdness at heart. There's a lot of that eclecticness that I've brought into my life and cherished and will forever cherish now. Some things I'm willing to leave behind, one of which, instead of having actual cereal bowls or whatnot, he'd use like the tubs of Country Crock and store that and clean that. And I've been told that was something that people did several decades ago. I get it. We can leave that tradition behind, hopefully. The other thing my mom kind of touched us a little bit in her statement a minute ago was some of the paperwork he had. So he did genealogy for years. And I always make fun of him, not because he did genealogy, but because he literally would have 2,000 pieces of paper just lying around his kitchen table in his living room. But he'd always swear he knew where every single page was. So a few years ago when he'd come back to Indiana for a service, Katie and I were like, let's clean it up. Nope. Won't put it on a flash drive, wouldn't believe it. Had to be still on physical paper. And his passwords, which he said to the day he died that he knew where his passwords were. Didn't know any of them, he just knew where they were at. But I always have a deep down appreciation for those older items, like going back to the antiques and things like that too. There's different antique places that we'd went. One of my favorite antiques that I'm going to keep forever now, and this was before anything had happened here, was actually made, I think, by Dutch. The old house. It sat at your house for several years. It's this old country house. In part, it's because I like houses and whatnot. I want to keep it that way. But it's such a hand-built memory. And we found it 10 years ago after he had his couple health incidents then in his closet. And they kept it at my mom and stepdad's house for several years. And then when I got my own place a couple years ago, I've put it. I haven't found a place to put it yet. But I think standing here today and just thinking about the last couple weeks, that's definitely a priority of mine. And it's just to look at that too. And even walking around my house, there were two other items, and I don't have them, unfortunately, as props today, but there's two things that he had gifted me going back to my real estate things that I always just really cherished, and looking at them again after everything will cherish even more. One of which sits in my office. It's a little sign that says Real Estate Jake, and it's from Things Remembered. It's probably made for me when I was like 6, but it's just an awesome memento from him. And then he made like a matching shirt too with a drawing that I had done and he had done too. And the polo, fits even smaller than my current polo. But yes, like I said, I love looking at those. And in his later years, speaking of fashion, he was never a man of suits and ties. He was always a man of Hawaiian shirts and flip-flops and probably some mismatched colors here and there. Thank you, Katie, for helping him a little bit with that at times. But he definitely dressed like he was on vacation, and that's good. He was retired, so he did as he should. But while he is watching me stand up here, probably telling me to slow down a little bit. I know my family told me to slow down a little bit. I do apologize if I started speaking fast. See right over there laughing a little bit, but I hope he's up there catching up with Dutch, Mom, Johnny, and Dwight as well, especially Johnny, this being the 55th anniversary, as my mom was saying. Better yet, I hope he's up there with all of his dogs as far as Indy, Phoenix, and especially Dexter. And the Dexter calendar, I can't tell you how many laughs I got in the following days after everything, looking at photos from the Dexter calendar. If anyone has a Dexter calendar, let me know. You do have one?
We have one.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
We got one.
Someone had commented, I forget who, and I do apologize, that said they have one. I said, I think we probably have one somewhere in the family, but I would like to get one way or another, because I hope everyone here has looked at the Dexter photos. I remember going up in his house, he had them along the walls too, and they're just so funny. There's so many different scenes. I can't describe them, but they're so funny. But like I said, for his sanity, I hope he doesn't have to watch another Penske or Ganassi driver win this season. And we were at Indianapolis Motor Speedway yesterday, and it was just, very heartwarming walking around where he used to walk around too. And I guess, while Penske has won at least the last 2 years, from what I recall, for the 500, hopefully, no, it probably won't happen, but hopefully, for his sake, they won't win any more this season. Because he definitely did not like Roger Penske.
Hello. For those who may not know me, I'm Abby. I'm Steve's youngest granddaughter and his favorite. But I knew him as Papa. And before I start, I want to thank you all for being here today, supporting my family and everyone during this difficult time. And please bear with me, I'm not a public speaker. But finding the words for an occasion like this was definitely challenging. Trying to capture a man's life in a few words feels nearly impossible, especially for someone as great as he was. Sorry. He was someone who embraced life with vibrant and unconditional love for the world and everyone in it. He had an innate curiosity that touched everyone he met, whether it was chatting with a grocery store clerk or his upstairs neighbor, or even random nurses that would come by just to say hi to him. He always wanted to know their stories, where they came from, how their families were, and what hobbies they enjoyed. And he was not only curious, but also passionate about sharing his knowledge. He found joy in teaching and shaping the lives of young minds, and I remember clearly he told me, "If I've made even a couple people happy, then I've done what God put me on this earth to do." And he did. The impact he had on countless lives is truly remarkable. And as a teacher, I'm sure my grandfather saw many graduations. I think I finally realized he was truly sick when he wasn't able to show up to physically support me anymore. He used to insist on going to all of my band concerts and recitals, even though we didn't sound as great as I'd like to think. And if some of you may not know, I graduated this year. And being so young, it's one of my greatest accomplishments yet. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to go due to him being sick in the hospital. But afterwards, I visited him, and I showed him the video of me walking across the stage. And I showed him all the silly pictures my friends and I took before and after. You know, typical teenage shenanigans. And he just seemed so happy and heartbroken that he couldn't have been there to see me walk across that stage himself. He promised he'd make it up to me, that he'd make me a shadow box of all my graduation and high school memorabilia. He told me how he used to make those for the graduated classes here. It was something for students to cherish their achievements and memories. And he was so fond, reminiscing, and being able to share that for others. It was something that they could cherish that reminded them of being students and all of their achievements in school. And he was so excited to make me one. He told me that once he was settled into his new home, I would have to bring him my cap and gown, my diploma, and anything else that symbolized my high school journey. He said, "You bring it to me, and I'll make it all nice for you. You'll have it for the rest of your life." And he was so sure and excited to share that with me. Sorry. My grandfather taught me about genuine kindness and passion. He showed me how to be kind and resilient in a world that's not always fair. And he taught me to be brave, to believe in myself, even when I didn't feel on top of the world. And he was one of my biggest supporters. And I'm sure that he felt the same for all his students and everyone around him. And it's hard to try and comprehend the full extent of his influence, but I can find solace in knowing that his memory will live on in all of us. That his curiosity will continue to ask questions. His adventurous spirit will journey internationally, and his kindness will inspire acts of generosity. And it's never easy to say goodbye to our loved ones, and I'm truly lucky that I got to say goodbye to him. And as this brings me to the end of my speech, I hope that we can tell those we love that we love them when we can, and that we linger at the door for a little while before we say goodbye, because those are the little moments that can sometimes matter the most. Thank you all again for listening and coming today.
He was born in the summer
Hi, everyone. At this time, we want to invite anyone who would like to come up and share any memories or just speak about Steve. This is your moment to shine.
My name's Lana, and I'm so happy to see so many familiar faces. Friends of mine, students of mine, family, extended family. Steve and I started working together when I got involuntarily transferred to Sarah Scott in 1984, and he was the first one that came to my room, and I said, Steve, I think my life is over. Honest to God, I said, I think my life is over. And he said, no. He said, give it a chance. He said, it will be wonderful. And 17 years later, it was probably the very best experience of 45 years I've ever spent, because I found out a couple things from him. One, he said that kids come to school with different kinds of baggage. Some come with suitcases, and some come with carry-ons. And I took that and I thought, you know what, that's kind of a really good thing to remember. And I used that several times. We taught right across the hallway from each other. He was married to my best friend since 3rd grade, one of his wives. One of his wives. And so that was kind of a connection that we had, but he always would tell me every single morning, he would say, teaching makes every other profession possible. And so I always took that along with me as well. When I was driving here today, I was listening to 70s on 7. I know none of you listen to 70s. And yacht rock radio, yes. And the Bee Gees came on, and the song was Love Inside and Out. And I thought, my God, that's Steve talking to me. Because he always would tell me wonderful stories about all of the kids. And we would talk probably every month on the phone. And it was odd, because a couple of weeks before he passed away, he called me on the phone. And I said, listen, I haven't talked to you for a while. Why haven't you called me? He says, well, I've been a little busy. I've been a little busy because I'm in the hospital. And I said, well, Steve, what's going on now? And so he told me, and he talked. He says, I need you to promise me something. He said, I need you to be in charge, can you imagine? Plant a tree at Sarah Scott in my honor. And I said, sure, I'll do that, not realizing that I was actually going to be doing it, so soon. So in the fall, when Chris comes back, we are going to plant a tulip tree in the yard there at Sarah Scott. And Rachel Bryant, who, by the way, was also one of our students, former students, is going to help us find the specific spot where we're going to plant that tree. So if anybody wants to throw in a couple cents on the tree, that would be lovely. He was a very creative, just so creative, and he would come over and he'd say, now, you need to do this or you need to do that, and I'd say, okay, fine. What a wonderful mentor to me. What a wonderful mentor to other teachers. What a clown. Tomfoolery, I think, was his middle name. He was always thinking up something to do to poor Joe Henry or to Steve Bowman or to Joe Huftelin, and always trying to figure out something, and they were always pulling tricks on each other. And I think that kind of helped me dive into Sarah Scott and become part of that family for 17 years, and I loved those years. There is a poem that I would like to read that was shared at my father's funeral. And it says, don't stand at my grave and weep because I'm not there. Rather, listen to the gentle breeze as it caresses the leaves. I'm a storm. For I am there. Hear that joyful noise of the birds in the branches, for I am there. Feel the warmth of the sun as it tenderly touches your cheek, for I am there. I promised that I would love you forever. And forever has just begun. So don't stand at my grave and weep, because I'm not there. I am in everything that God has given you to cherish, love, and enjoy. And I will be there with you always. And if I go while you are still here, know that I live on, vibrating to a different measure behind the veil that you cannot see. You will not see me, but you must have faith. I wait for the time when we can laugh together. Be aware and be aware of each other, and until then, live your life to the fullest. And when you need me, just whisper my name, because I am in your heart, and I will be there. He loved every one of the people that are in this room and anybody else that came. And when I had to go out to the car to get something for the refreshments, I said to the man, have you ever heard a funeral this loud? And he said, no. And I said, then we have done our job at Sarah Scott. Thank you.
I tried to be in full Steve regalia today, and he requested Hawaiian shirts, bright shirts, whatever. I'm not nearly as eloquent as the people that have gone on before me, but as Chris was talking, I was jotting down some memory notes, and the first thing that came to mind was when Steve and I first met. Chris was, and she allowed us to grow up. But and you can tell your family or not, but remember the NTA phrase? We're not. I'm just wanted to jog your memory. But when I met Steve at Sarah Scott, we hit it off instantly for the reasons that Lana said. It just a couple of idiots, and I got my memory hat. This is Boy State hat. Steve got me into the Boy State program. His 75 year was my 76 year, and he said, why don't you come with me this summer to this Boy State program sponsored by the American Legion? I'm like, what the hell is that? And he said, oh, you'll love it. And I said, Steve, I just spent a whole year with a bunch of idiot kids. I don't want to go spend a week in the summer with a dozen. Well, what a shock that turned out to be. But these are junior boys going into their senior year. And at that point in time, they were the, I don't like the term, but they were the cream of the crop in Indiana. And I was just blown away by the fact that they were so intelligent and so involved, and they wanted to learn about our form of government and what it took to get things done. And not at the federal level, because they're pretty much a bunch of idiots there, but looking at state, local, city, and elected offices in Indiana. So we went through that. And Steve was very protective of his camera equipment. And we were always hassling him about, Steve, give us your camera. So we'd get into his room, we'd take his camera. And we were a bunch of juveniles ourselves. And we'd hide it and it'd tick him off. And he'd go find it. Well, then we'd get him out of his dorm room and get him running around. And so when he found the camera and he ran into his dorm room, and we know, Steve, let us in. I'm not letting you in. Come on, Steve, let us in. Well, the doors at Indiana State dorms were about that much space between it. So he said, you guys can't get in here. So what we did, we took a newspaper, filled it full of powder, talcum powder, and we said, you know, come on to the door. When he got, you could hear him coming close to the door. We took our foot, stomped on that paper, and powder went everywhere inside the room. And all he heard, oh, you sons of bitches, yeah, bye, yeah. And so he finally agreed. He opened the door, and he's standing there, and he looked like a ghost. He just covered in powder. And just one of many stories. And our other one was, we would be eating lunch, and somebody would put hot sauce in his Coke. Stir it up so he didn't know it was there. He'd take a drink. You sons of bitches. That was just, we had so much fun. And then talking about the 500, I don't know what pictures you guys saw, but he had a little album off to the side of the snake pit. And if you're not sure what the snake pit was, it was a place at one point in time at the 500 where anything went. I mean, literally anything. And he had various pictures of various people doing various things. And, but he just talked, he mentioned a little bit about, we had, I don't say it's competition, but he's had 3 wives and I've had 2. And when between wives, I was staying in his basement. So I didn't have to go rent an apartment. So we got to be really pretty good friends. We shared a lot of stories. And then the one thing that he did, and I don't know if you still have them or not, but he painted, in the summer he'd take off and go up Michigan around the lake. But he loved lighthouses, and he painted lighthouses. So every year he'd come back with a story, and usually somewhere along the line he met a girl and ended up bringing her back to Terre Haute, and that relationship continued numerous times. But he was always just a gentleman. He was kind. He was courteous, and he was like a brother. Love him.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea D. Smitty, and I represent, I guess, the first one up here to represent one of Steve's students. And I went to Sarah Scott between, I don't know, maybe 82, 85, my junior high years, so 7, 8, 9. And let me say something. I lost my father a couple years ago, and it does change your life. I loved my father dearly. I had a great relationship with my father, but I have never felt so lucky to have other people in my life that have also been a father figure, and Link was one of those. And when you talk about Sarah Scott, I don't remember too much about middle school. I don't remember too much about high school. By high school, I had jobs, and I don't know, I was kind of already an adult by that time. But junior high were some of the best times of my life. I have so many vivid memories of all the teachers, and just coming of age during that time and finding out who I was. And probably the best gift that Link ever gave me was to make me understand my own worth. I, born and raised in Terre Haute, moved 6 years ago to Texas. I am an executive vice president at a bank in Texas. And I feel like I've had a very successful life, and mainly because of him teaching a lot of us at that time that we had worth. And so you talk about baggage, I might have brought a truckload, I think. And I think he knew that. He knew my mother, so he knew kind of my home situation. And I can remember him verbally kicking my ass a couple times, right? Like, what are you doing? I know you can do this. I know you're smarter than that. He got me out of home ec. I got to take art twice. And I did things. Yeah, I know. I mean, this man had power, let me just tell you. But he taught me things even in that I had no idea I was capable of. He saw things in us as students that it was his goal in life to teach us of what we could possibly do. And I still have those things. I'm one of those crazy people that have this trunk that has, and I forgot my buttons. I had all the buttons. I remember taking him once, showing him, and he's like, oh yeah, that's this, and that's this. And we compared collections. But I go back and look at the art that I made, and it's like, I could not possibly have done that. But he had a way of making you believe in yourself and believe in your capabilities. And I really, truly credit a lot of who I am today as an adult and as a contributing member of society to what he basically made me believe I could do and that I had my worth. Now, I also think back about him in those days and think he couldn't have gotten away with a lot of the stuff he did back then. So, again, I'm a child of the 80s, right? We would have tight pant contests, and he would, yeah, see.
Margaret McDavid texted me and said, ask your dad about the tight jeans contest.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
shot a video of him talking about the
I've
tight jeans
got to
contest.
get a copy of that,
My
yes.
best friend was in the hospital room with me and was about to fall on the floor. She
Oh,
said,
yes.
you did what?
Yes. So I say that only amongst friends and family, right? Because most people go, who was this man? What did he do? Wait a minute. And he didn't do anything bad in any way. It was just you count the lines of how tight the pants were. I mean, I have pictures because, of course, he took all the pictures. And I was a cheerleader during that time, so he took a lot of the pictures of that. So we were around him a lot in that regard, too, of you couldn't sit down. You just kind of leaned, right? Because things were so tight, and you'd count the lines. And I'm telling you what, there were a lot of us, like, I'm gonna win that contest, right? I'm not gonna eat for a week, and I may not be able to take deep breaths, but I am gonna win that contest. Throwing staplers. It started with erasers, but then a couple times in art class, I know the stapler got flung across the room. But everything he did was in love, and we adored that man, I am telling you. And I think one of the greatest gifts of my life is that he and I have kept in contact as adults. If I would go out to Arizona on conferences, I would always take him out to lunch. My husband was able to meet him. We talked a lot. In the last 4 years, had battled breast cancer twice and had gone through the chemo and all that stuff. And so when he had his last battle and had to go through all the radiation, he and I talked a lot. And this is a man that I adore, and I think so much highly, like you talk about heroes in your life and having an influence, that would call me and say, he said, I don't think I can do any more of this radiation. And I said, yes, you can. I'm not going to put up with that. Are you kidding me? You're tougher than that. And so to see the role reversed of him saying, what is your experience and how do I get through this, was a gift to me to be able to give back to him. I told him, I said, I'm not going to take any of that. You're definitely tougher. And he made it through. I mean, it's not fun, it's not pretty, but he made it through. I will say that I'm glad that the tattoo that you have is of something of presentable, because the only thing he ever wrote in any of my yearbooks was making the dog look like it peed on the floor. So it's like, okay, can you sign my yearbook? Yeah, here you go. I was blessed to have about an hour and a half conversation with him in February. He called me. I had assisted him with something a couple years ago, and I was blessed that he thought to call me and ask. Unfortunately, it was something I could not help him with, and that has really kind of broken my heart since then. But the gift was that I had an hour and a half conversation with him, and he sounded like he was back in Sarah Scott, right? The life, the jokes, the memories. Man, that guy could remember everything. Was pretty amazing. So I just want to say that while he was not my father, he was certainly a father figure. He was a father figure to many of us. He was a mentor, I'm sure, in many ways. And I am so blessed to have all those memories and to also, like I said, be able to see him as an adult, because when you see someone as a kid, you think, of course you were all 100 years old when I was a kid, right? Because that's how you see things. And so now to see him as an adult and get to know him and his life as a human, because you guys were kind of superheroes, it teaches you lessons in that regard too. And it teaches you that you have your date of birth and you have your date of death, but it's all that stuff, the dash in the middle and how you do it. And I'm just here to tell you, if I'm only one, and I know I'm not, I'm one of thousands, I'm sure, who was touched by him, then he's at the gates with cheers and blessings at this point in time. So thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sharing him with us. And of course, I know all kinds of stuff about Chris because he talked about her all the time. But thank you for his life and his influence into making us who we are today.
That was a tough act to follow, but I'll keep the student portion of the program going. Hi everyone, my name's Margaret McDavid, and I was fortunate enough to have been one of Link's Scotties. Years were around the same time, 81 to 84, I think it was. And I'm the youngest of the McDavid family. Some of you may know some of my brothers and sisters or my mom and dad. 13 kids in our family, and I was the youngest. I am the youngest. So Chris, but I say young. I keep saying young, but you keep saying old, and we're the same age, so please stop. It's okay. Just, there may be a slight age difference, who knows. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about, the perspective from, knowing Link as a student and saying some things on behalf of my family as well. I've reached out to all my brothers and sisters. We were together 2 weeks ago for a family wedding, and this is life. This is part of life, the ups and downs and the joys and celebrations and reunions. It's been said you can't go home again. But as I was talking to Chris last week, she let me know some of her last comforting words to her father were, "I'm taking you home, Daddy." And looking out today and seeing every seat taken here and all the people who came before and all the love that is in this room, it is tremendous, and I can't think of any better send-off for him. I want to just, let you know how, express my condolences to the whole family. And Chris, that extends to Brent and Jacob and Isaac and Katie and Abby and Lyle, your family. I mean, growing up, I just would hear Link rave about you as well as Chris, and then Chris and I became very good friends. The second part of what I wanted to say is Chris and I went to South together, and that's where I first got to know her in person, although I felt like I already knew her because, as someone's already said, Link would talk about Chris all the time, and being the photographer that he was, he had tons of pictures of her. I was like, is she a child model? What is that? Has she been in magazines I'm not aware of? But Link was just one of a kind. One of the favorites in our family. My parents, having 13 kids, they lived in 4 different cities, traveled the country, and just certain people just stay with you, and Link was one of them. As my dad used to say, he was a peach, and it's appropriate, that's kind of orange, right? So, the time I was at Sarah Scott and before and after too, I know it's just such a special place, such a special, special place. I was talking to one of my sisters when we got the news, and we were just reminiscing in the McDavid family style with a few beers, I'm sure, and just, kind of talking about Link and our experiences. And one of my sisters said, a lot of the people I work with and some of my friends will say, oh gosh, middle school, junior high was a blur. Like I wasn't at my best. That's a hard time, and that is a hard time for kids. Your bodies are changing. You're going through things. You're on the verge of adulthood, and oh my God, I grew up when there wasn't social media. I can't imagine what kids are dealing with. And thank God there wasn't, but I can't imagine what they deal with today. But that could be a really, really tough environment, and it probably would have been had it not been for the teachers and the faculty at Sarah Scott and the love there. I remember, I played tennis at Sarah Scott, and I remember oh, Woodrow Wilson, look at all these tennis courts they have and all that. Well, we had, I feel, not to compare, but at Sarah Scott there was such spirit and love there. None of that mattered. I remember one time Link spending, I think, his whole weekend painting the gymnasium at Sarah Scott in the school colors, just because he knew it would make us feel special. He knew it would help create community and spirit, and those things stand out to me, taking this free time that he had. And he worked so much. He was advised so many different students. I'm glad someone else brought up the tight jeans contest, because I wasn't going to. But now that someone's opened the door, I think he was an unofficial faculty advisor, I think, for the newspaper. And I remember we would rank people, who was on the list this week. And it was just, it sounds weird to say it was innocent, but it really was at the time. But funny, I remember he had a joke book on his desk, like Truly Tasteless Jokes, and I'm looking through that. And yeah, someone said earlier, there's certain things you probably couldn't get away with in today's environment. But, the teachers I've seen today, and just think, I know Mr. Taylor is probably watching on the live stream, but just seeing them as kind of partners in crime. And I mean that literally. Because, I think paddling is not allowed now, right? But back then, you had to have a witness, so let's just say that. But, that was part of the tough love, discipline. I know parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles in the room, discipline is a tough thing with children, but it shows love. It's a sign of love that you're setting boundaries and structure for them. And he would do that with us. I remember one time I was in his art class in 8th grade, and somebody was acting up. I don't know who it was, and it was kind of a snowball effect. And so a bunch of us, the whole class got rowdy. He just stepped outside for a minute. The whole class was very rowdy. He comes back, and he is just angry, and he's like, what's going on? You're all getting Fs. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna fail. Like, I've never even gotten like a B. Like, and then I'm thinking, like, how can I change the F to an A on the report card? And I'm like, okay, how does this work? But he just, he had the highs and he had some lows. He was authentic. He was who he was. That story that day, you guys will be happy to know, none of us got Fs. I think we somehow redeemed ourselves back in his good graces, and he's like, all right, but don't let it happen again. We're just kids. We're just acting up. It was fun times. It was very special. A few of my siblings talked about different art projects they had that he would do. Like, you got to create like your own cartoon universe. Like, how creative, how wonderful was that? Just some of the still lives. I remember struggling with an art project once and thinking, I just don't get this. I'm just not, I have some talent, but I'm just not there. He made you feel like you were Picasso. Like, he made it, just instilled so much confidence. I think that was one thing for me that I really got out of junior high that I didn't maybe have going into it. A lot of confidence and just like, you can do this. I remember when our 9th grade girls won the basketball county championship, and Link was just our biggest cheerleader. He had this created like a whole separate page in the student paper, just putting all our names and just made us feel special. Things like that. Chris, I knew you so long before I actually met you. And that sophomore year, 1985, in Fraulein Krohn's German class, when both of us were taking German, and it's not a popular class necessarily, there may have been 5 or 10 of us in the class, and we sat together and we kind of got to know each other, and what you were just talking about, Jacob, about the it's Jacob, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if you were Jacob or Isaac.
Isaac's dark curly hair.
Okay, gotcha. What you were talking about, Jacob, with like the just kind of a little bit, you didn't use the word snark, but a little bit of the fun and just like, kind of like those 2 old man Muppets, who just kind of make fun of what's going on in the world. Chris, we had such fun and friendship, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree at all, and I'm just so grateful for your lifelong friendship, and I love you too. And just seeing this legacy here in front of me, just the colors, the spirit, the community. One teacher told me, I won't name names, but I was talking to a teacher earlier, and they said, this is the kind of send-off I would love when it's time for me. It's just fitting, and seeing all of Link's grandchildren and nieces and nephews, it's just his legacy clearly will live on in so many ways, through so many good acts. So thank you.
My name is Charlie Shackley. I've taught with Link for many, many years. First started teaching in Sarah Scott in '87. I'd had another career in construction. I had no clue what teaching was yet. I had an idea what it was going to be like. And I was fortunate enough to have him in the room next door. And our rooms were attached with a little walkway. And Tom Taylor was right across the hall from me. And Sandy Kelly, I met her when I moved into the school. I was moving equipment. I was AV director. Sandy was a new assistant principal, but I didn't know that. And after we moved a bunch of furniture together, she introduced herself as what she was. And I thought, what did I say? So I told Link that. And Link cracked up. He said, well, you had the perfect chance. You could have told her anything you wanted. And she couldn't have said a word because you didn't know who she was yet. And the old Sarah Scott, if you were there, was warm. And I think it was warm on the good days when the radiator would melt the crayons if you touched it. And my room hit 105, 106 degrees sometimes. I had a big thermometer in my room. And I had all the lights off in the room. And the windows wide open, which did no good. And Link, right in the middle of my algebra class, he sticks his nose in the back of the room and he goes, Shackley, will you quit talking so much? It's already hot enough. And the kids just cracked up, and I'm a young teacher thinking, oh man, but it's what the kids needed. They needed some lightheartedness. And I kind of patterned the way I taught by watching. By watching how he taught. He and I coached for several years almost all the academic teams between the two of us. Math counts, Hunter Creek Math Contest, Super Bowl, we split it up together. And we spent a lot of time together talking about how to motivate the kids or which ones weren't doing the work they needed to do. And we would take turns playing good cop, bad cop sometimes with them. But the passion that man had for everything, he didn't do it halfway. And he and I would spend a lot of time talking about students that weren't on the academic teams during the time we were talking about the academic teams, trying to figure out how to reach somebody. I remember going to a faculty meeting one time and he was talking about something a kid had told him to let the school be aware of a situation, and I was saying something. And somebody said, how do you know that? He said, well, the kids tell me, because they trusted him. They knew he had their back. I did a lot of projects at his house. I worked with construction in the summertime, and Lana I worked with, we contracted to do his kitchen for him. And I came in a lot of times and trimmed, hung doors for him and did things for him. Or he'd have projects, art projects, or photographic projects, and he'd want something built. And I'd end up building it for him. And it was never right the first time. And I don't care what it was, he always could be, he was always complimentary, but it wasn't the look he wanted. He got ready to move. And he couldn't wait to get to Gilbert. And I and Don and Clyde Stringer and one of Don's sons moved him. And he had all these concrete ornaments. I don't mean little concrete, I mean big concrete. Remember those? Great.
How many trucks did you guys take?
We took 3 trucks. 3 trucks, and he had pictures in my garage boxes of pictures in my garage for 8 or 9 years before he finally got them, because there wasn't room for them. And he had all these great big concrete yard ornaments, and he wanted to take him with him. And I'm like, Steve, you can buy those there. I'm sure they got them. Oh, no, I've got to have these. So he didn't want them to get chipped. So I built, with 2x4s, crates to go around them. And then we had to load them. And he made sure he supervised all the loading to make sure they were just right. You know, they weighed 100 and some pounds. They weren't going to fall over, you know, but he was worried. And he had a gun safe. And it wasn't a small gun safe. It weighed about 400 pounds. And it wasn't full of guns. It was full of cameras. Because that was the love of his life. He loved cameras. One of his loves. He had lots of loves, but that was one of the big things. And so he wanted that taken over there. And I said, Steve, I'll buy it from you. Pay you whatever a new one costs. And they'll deliver it and put it in the house. Oh no, he had to have that one. And I know it was fun to carry. We got it up in the truck. We drive, and that was a trip and a half driving to Arizona. We get there, I think it was 118 that day we unloaded. And we're sweating our, you know what's off. And he's, you know, you were there was plenty of water, there were sandwiches and stuff, but we were just smoking hot. And we get ready to take this safe in. Well, Steve had measured it. There was actually a 1-inch clearance of total of where he wanted to put it. Like a little closet with no door. And we carried it in there. And I had to climb over the top of it and get behind it. And then they shoved and I tried to pull, then I had to get back out. We had to take all the trim off the trim off because it wouldn't fit otherwise. And then he sold it 6 months later. That's Link. He was so passionate about his students. He cared so much. And then there's one other thing I want to tell you, and then I'll let somebody else. I'm not as eloquent as everyone else here, but he and I got into it about something. Because I tried to be as passionate about working with students as he was. I tried to really push them. And he was such a good role model for that. But he and I got into it. And at Sarah Scott, we used to eat in this little bitty thin, narrow room. Because I think it had air conditioning. And that's one of the few places in the building that had air conditioning. I mean, now kids would get in trouble just to go to the dean's office because there was air conditioning there. So we were sitting in there, and he and I got into it. And I was so mad. He was so mad. I was furious. We never could remember what we were mad about later on. And I walked out of the room, and I slammed the door. I tried to break it. I was so mad. Next morning, I was there with students in the morning. We were doing math. Probably 6:30, 7:15 in the morning. Here comes Steve. Now, if you know Steve, 6:30, 7:15 in the morning, you don't see Steve at school. And he walked in, he goes, Shackley, come here. So I walked out in the hall and goes, hey, you want to act like we're mad for a week and see what kind of rumors we can hear? I said, yeah, sounds good. And I walked back in, he yelled something at me from the hallway like he was mad at me. So the kids had spread it out. That was Steve. You know, he was passionate, he cared, but once it was over, it was that way with his students. He could chew a student out, give you all Fs, whatever, but it was over when it was over. And that passion is what I want to remember. Remember.
Don't worry, I'll be really quick. My name is Troy Uahinui. I was fortunate enough to have Link for both homeroom and art for a number of years. And I was one of the original sweat hogs. So I wasn't even going to come up here until I heard a story about planting a tree. So do you guys familiar with the row of Lombardy poplars on the north side of the old campus there? That was from us, our class. It was Arbor Day, I think, some kind of community thing, and we were able to actually get out of the building and plant some trees. And so Link collected money from everybody in class. It was a donation only. Like, between all of the kids, $3, $5, he had a lot of cash. I think it was like $60 to $80. So he actually went that day to the nursery to buy some trees. He goes, hey, I got 3 trees. So we get the shovel and we dig 3 holes. He reads, how deep they need to be. So we get the holes dug, we open the package. Little did he know that when he purchased the 3 tree bundles, that each bundle had like 10 to 15 trees in them. And that's where all those came from. It was like, oh man. And what ended up, Link said, get the shovel, we got some more holes to dig. So that's all, thanks.
Can we do a duo? Actually, I wasn't going to do this, but I've gotten in trouble my entire life for talking. So people would be surprised if I didn't. I was in the first class at Sarah Scott. I was the class 74. I was in 8th grade. And Steve was our first cool adult in our life. He got us. And some of us were a little ornery, and he let us be that way. And I think he liked that spirit. And I became a lifelong friend with him. Actually, my son had him. I come from a family of 8. Our last name was Eslick. And Steve always called us Slicks. We were the Slicks. And he had my son and my niece. And my son knew that I had a crush on a teacher at Sarah Scott. So I was single at the time, and Link was single at the time. So my son thought, what a cool idea. So he gave Steve my phone number, and he called me, and he had just gone through kind of a bad breakup, and he was a little bitter. So I became kind of the shoulder to lean on. It wasn't a big turn on for a prospective boyfriend or anything. But we had some really good talks. We met for drinks a few times. And then later on with Facebook, social media, it was so much easier to keep in touch and keep up with everything and to watch everything Chris was doing and the kids and his. I remember the day the China doll came home and just how happy he was and how much he loved all of you. It was just so admirable. And when he had his brain bleed, one of his numerous encounters, we said something on Facebook. I said, it sounds like you need 2 of your favorite students to come cheer you up. And he said, that would be awesome. Come on. Well, my friend Holly Washburn, who, I think all the students like to think they were the favorite students, and he probably told them they were, but so Holly called me and said, I've got all these points, can you go? I said, let's go. So we got on a plane and went to Gilbert, Arizona, and Steve was in a very nice facility, a rehab facility, and Brent, you probably remember this. So we show up at the facility and we had all these props. We had a big peace sign. We had different goofy things to put on him. And we came in with these shirts on. And we spent 3 visits with him over the weekend. And we laughed so much and were so loud. I cannot believe we did not get kicked out of that facility. I mean, you'd have thought we were a traveling comedy show. It was wonderful. And we've got wonderful pictures. And before we left, he signed the back of our shirts, and it says, love the class of 74 Scotties, love you, Link. And I didn't even remember this, and then you said something about bringing things, and I saw it in the closet, and it just about melted my heart just to see it, just to remember that weekend. And then just one more thing, I could tell dozens of things, but when you were speaking about the storage unit that he called me and told me he had something that he was sending to me. I had no idea what. He didn't indicate. And I get this package from him. He said it was something he found in storage and he couldn't think of who needed it, but then I came to mind. He said, you're the one that should have these. And it's a collection of 10 beautifully framed covered bridges in black and white. And all matted, just beautiful. And I live in Park County, Indiana. And he just thought, Park County, covered bridges, Kathy needs to have these. So it's just something that I will cherish forever, just his generosity, his friendship. He called me a week before he died, and I didn't get a chance to call him back. And that's just going to haunt me. And I did text him, and I know he knew I loved him, and I'll just cherish his memory forever. So I didn't get in trouble for talking.
My name's Sean Foster. I don't do this, so. Link knew me before we met. He had took care of my older brother. He had my cousin. So it was about 1988 when I come in. I had him for first hour class. He says, not another Foster. A couple, 2 or 3 days into school, he come in, first hour. He said, I need somebody to do attendance. I got hall duty on the other side of the school, and I can't get to my room before the bell rings. And he looked at me. To this day, I don't know why. He had hired me to take care of his yard. I got the opportunity to meet Dexter once a week. He'd always bring Dexter out when I was done. The backyard must be bagged. He made that clear. He would tell Dexter to tell me thank you, or he would tell Dexter to say thank you. And he'd always jump on me. I didn't get the opportunity to know his other dogs. I did get to see Maggie on Facebook. My 8th grade year, I had him for a club. I took a pottery class, or ceramics. He helped me pick the colors. He showed me how to paint, showed me how to dry brush, and he took it and cleared it for me. I brought it back and I smelled it. He goes, don't smell that. He says, you're going to lose some brain cells. Later on in my 8th grade year, the art pottery class, it was another student, Link, and I. Link's back at his desk, us two are over the other side of the room. The student says, what's that noise? I said, oh, it's the clock on the wall. Link said, no, it's not. I said, yeah, it is. He says, no, it's my mechanical valve. I sat there a few minutes. I said, no, it's not. He said, come here. He says, put your ear here. He wanted me to put my ear by his chest. I heard that valve. My mouth dropped. I hadn't shared with anybody yet that I was facing surgery, that I had to have a valve replacement. From that day on, Link and I had a special bond. He helped me have the courage to do that surgery that I didn't want to do. He had a famous saying to me. A lot of you teachers out there know me. I was never a happy kid. I always frowned. He told me, he says, Foster, turn that frown upside down. You know it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. I say at least once a week. He reached out to me 2-3 days before he passed away. he called me. I didn't realize how fast this was going to go. I'd reached out to Chris. I said, Chris, you think you'd like to have a visitor? Keep in mind, I've never been on a plane, and I know I couldn't make the drive. Chris said, let's get him settled in. I was okay with that. But in the back of my mind, my wheels were spinning. How fast can I make this happen? I never got to say my real goodbye. But the night I hung up the phone, I said, Link, I want you to know I love you, man. I don't tell many people I love them. You could hear him kind of tear up. He says, thanks. I needed to hear that. Unfortunately, I've said many goodbyes that none of us like to do. Something I want to encourage each and every one of you. Tell your friends and family you love them, because you don't know what the next second is. Thanks.
Hi, Kendall Schnurple. I was a student at Sarah Scott from 83 to 86, I think. Link was the first male teacher I'd ever had. By show of hands, can you guys tell me, if you polled people that you know, would they say you were the best or your favorite, their favorite, anything, whatever it is you do, right? It just amazes me how many people say Link was their favorite teacher. I would like to be somebody's favorite anything, right? It just, and I have 3 kids, right? I don't think I'm their favorite anything. I remember Link telling me, Chris, we've never met, but I remember I went through a divorce, now 15, 16 years ago or something. And I was in Terre Haute and I ran into Link and we were talking about it. And I had one daughter at the time, and he shared with me, I don't remember everything we talked about, but it was comforting and it was, private. But he did tell me, he said, Chris raised me. He said, I think he might have said me and Mr. Taylor too. I don't know, but there. Bowman? Okay, all right, yeah. He definitely did. So it's nice to finally see you. I'm just going to echo what everybody else says, right? I didn't have another teacher that reached me the way he did. I was lucky enough to get into his social studies class and his art class, and until today, I thought I was very special to him. And I'll tell you why. I remember the day that I went home to my parents and I told my dad, my art teacher thinks that I'm pretty talented in art, and he is going to let me skip industrial arts class and take art for 2 semesters. And I said, this doesn't happen. But you have to sign a note of permission to let me, skip. And then I get here and find out, apparently he does that every year. It's not a big deal at all. But I'm going to share with you one story, and then I'm going to get out of here. I showed up at Link's retirement party or something at the Valley in Terre Haute a number of years ago now. I just had to, when I found out about it, I was like, I have to go. And we would see each other periodically throughout the year. I didn't keep in touch with him, but I would run into him because my parents still lived in Terre Haute until they both passed away last year. But I knew I had to go there just to tell him a little bit about the impact that he had on me. I love my dad, but my dad was a career military guy, I probably had 2 conversations with him in my whole childhood that I can remember. So having that connection with Link at a time that's horrible for all kids, right? At middle school, junior high school, it did. It gave me confidence to think that I could do something, that I could be something. My mom didn't graduate from high school. My dad didn't go to college. Military guy again. And here was this guy, this teacher, right, who just really made me feel like, yeah, all right, I'm not this clumsy, awkward kid that can't really do anything. He gave me a lot of confidence in art. I kept a lot of the artwork I did in his class. It was like one of the proudest days when he got one of my little paper mache things put into the Swope Art Gallery for some exhibit. Didn't really mean anything, but to me, to tell my parents that I got this thing up in the Swope Art Gallery in Terre Haute. Just a lot of things. He was actually track coach the one year of my life that I ran track. You can't tell by looking at me, but I was not a great track athlete. And this is where I get into the story that I told at his retirement. So I happened to be at Sarah Scott at a time where there were a number of really, really good athletes. We had a phenomenal track team. Tony McGee was a runner that year. If you were from Terre Haute, you know the name. He played football at Michigan and then had a career in the NFL. Tony was not the fastest guy on our track team, if that tells you anything about the athletes that were there at the time. And then I was there and I showed up at practice, but I don't even think I ever competed in a track meet. I don't know. But it was just something to do. And it was fun hanging out with Link, which I still think it's odd that our track coach was smoking a cigarette while we were running. But I remember reminiscing with him a number of years later, before the retirement party. But we'd run into each other somewhere, and we were talking about things. He's like, "Yeah, you really weren't a really good, track runner at all." And I said, "Well, you weren't really that great of a coach." and he said, "Well, I didn't have to be. I had all the best athletes." Right? So I share that story at his retirement party, and I told people that probably didn't really know what had happened with me, but I was the first kid in our family to go to college, became a CPA, went to law school, became a tax attorney. I just came back to Indianapolis. I used to work at Rockefeller Center in Midtown Manhattan for a large public accounting firm. And at his retirement party, I kind of told a little bit about this. And I at the end, I said, I'm not at all saying this to brag. I was not special. I didn't have an immense amount of talent, but kind of like Link with the track team, when you have the best teacher, it's kind of all you need. So I hope you guys get a little bit of comfort. Like I said, I just went through this last year with my 2 parents both passing away. I know it's horrible, but he was an amazing person, and so hopefully it makes you feel a little bit better to hear all this. And they're all the same stories, right? We needed somebody like Link in our lives, and he, allowed us to go out and do great things and made us feel good about ourselves, and had some person to look up to that didn't treat us like idiot kids. And so he was just an awesome person. So, yeah. We're fraternity brothers, by the way.
This is probably my time I can laugh a little bit now, and I probably won't. I'll probably make it through this real easy. But I was thinking earlier today. I spoke briefly with Beth Pio, and she had used the term in our conversation, "golden age," and I thought, that's kind of how it was. You know, I look back on those years growing up in Terre Haute with Steve being so close by, just down the street, you know, and so I always saw him at my parents' house, at his house, at the grandparents' house, at different events. He was just always around. He was the only uncle that I had in town. Chris was the only cousin I had in town. So that was the immediate family. All my mom's family lived in other cities. So as I was thinking about that, the golden age, and people coming up sharing these stories, I thought, you know, I just assumed all this was normal in a Lingenfelter household, that was how everybody's household was, you know. And I looked at this picture of Steve over here flipping the bird earlier, and it made me think, you know, I listened to this sports program on TV, and when they do the little intro for the sports program, they say there may be some cuss words because that's how people in the real world talk. And I think that's how Steve was. You know, he was very real. He was very real. And, you know, as a parent, I was so glad to hear Chris say she knew that he loved her more than anything. Because as a parent, you love your kids, and your kids don't understand that till they have their own kids. They don't understand how much you love them. And everything everyone said today is the stuff that I started to think about the last few days that I guess I never really thought about before. You know, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about my time growing up or what Steve meant or any of those things. It was just normal. That was just what it was. And I thought about how many times Steve was encouraging. You know, he was always encouraging. Oh, you can do that. That's so great that you're doing that. That's such a tremendous thing. I'm so proud of you. You know, he was always saying stuff to encourage whatever you were doing. And then I thought about all the stuff he was passionate about. You know what? I'm passionate about my family and golf. And that's, I mean, I'm limited. I'm one-track minded, right? So, but I was going through thinking of all the things that Steve was passionate about, and I could come up with something for every letter of the alphabet. I didn't want to do it because it's kind of corny, you know, but I thought about art and history and cars and dogs and students and golf, like, you know, at least when Eric Hausman or I was playing, he was passionate about. Other than that, he probably didn't care too much about golf. But and Lingenfelter genealogy and music and the fact that, you know, he turned me on to more than one Billy Joel song over the years. And photography and just so much stuff. And seeing all the Sarah Scott people here again is really cool. And I remember when I was at Woodrow Wilson, and it had to be the time Steve was coaching track, he said, Lyle, you got to come to Sarah Scott. You got to come to this track meet. You got to see Stacy Batson. You got to see how he can jump. And I can't remember at that time, he was around 20 feet in the long jump as like an 8th grader, you know. So I went to a Sarah Scott track meet just to see Stacy Batson jump. And it was all because Steve was bragging on Stacy, how good he was. And there was another time I remember Steve saying, you got to come to this basketball game. You got to see Jonathan Sweat. You know, he's so good. He can dunk. He's in the 8th grade. This kid's unbelievable. And so all the time Steve was bragging on his students. It just so happened with me, it had to do a lot with sports. He connected with me through sports. And, you know, I thought about it was kind of interesting looking back on it. Steve is a photographer for the Speedway and a photographer at Indiana State. And that was just normal stuff. I mean, we had pictures of Larry Bird, you know, at the house growing up, and pictures of Indy cars and just all sorts of stuff. Steve had extra stuff laying around, and he'd give it to us kids, so we had all that stuff laying around the house. And so I just think it's great to hear everybody's stories, specific stories. You know, the throwing staplers and erasers, and at our house it was Christmas wrapping paper, and we'd find wrapping paper behind chairs and stuffed in couches and stuff for weeks and months after Christmas all over the house on top of armoires, and it was always a big wrapping paper battle at our house. But he was such a great prankster and joker, and the encouragement and the passion that he had, and like I think Chris said, you know, he just didn't do anything half-assed. You know, everything he did was full tilt, and because of that, he made a great impression, and he lived a rich and full life, and I just hope that that's something we all can do more. And just like with the encouragement, I think, you know, when you think about how maybe Steve encouraged you, you just never know when you give that encouragement what it means to somebody. And sometimes I do that, but I know I don't do it nearly as well as I could. And I hope that that inspires me and inspires everybody else to do a better job of that, because people just need to hear it. You don't know what their situation is, and you don't know what impact that will have on them later in life and what they do and accomplish. And so I'm very, very grateful for that Steve was able to do that. I know just from talking to some of my children, my dad was able to do that a little bit. And on the surface, you know, sometimes Lingenfelters yell and cuss a little bit, and we're a little over the top in some areas, but I think it's a passionate thing. When you love something, you want it to be so good, and you want to be able to tell your kids well done, and you want to be able to see them live the best life that they can live. And the same thing, Steve had a much bigger family with students and teachers, and it's just fascinating to me to hear that people have talked to him, you know, a couple of weeks ago, a month ago. They made a trip to Phoenix, you know. I mean, you know, we're all living our own lives and doing our own thing, and I just think that's amazing that he touched people in that way, and there was that reciprocity there that people were able to take part in that with him and be there for him as he was there for them. So I could go on and on about the stuff, but I just very grateful again for everybody to show up today, and if anybody's got more stories, I'd love to hear them. So thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak before I close it out? Hi again. So first, bear with me. I'll probably get emotional during this. If I don't make eye contact, I'm going to just try to say what I want to say. But as some of you may know, I'm Katie Catherine Iannucci. I'm Steve's grandchild. Specifically, I'm his favorite. F word's hard, being grown up around him, you know. But first, I wanted to say thank you for everybody for coming today. And I'm really grateful that everyone could be here to honor who my grandfather was. And I know he made an impact on so many. Also, I like seeing orange everywhere. It's my favorite color. I'm realizing this now. And while the circumstances are sad, I know he's looking down happy that we all get to be together to celebrate him. But especially that his family and grandkids were able to come out to Terre Haute, the place he loved and talked about so much. And I know a lot of stories have been shared today. The stapler one I do want to know more about later. But I want to share my very favorite one, which is he taught me how to drive. And some of you may have known that, which I think it's funny because apparently my mom's grandfather, Dutch, had to teach her how to drive because her and Steve would get into it a little bit. And when my dad tried to teach me how to drive, it would be like, Katie, that was a yellow. And I'm like, no, it was still kind of green. Like I could have gotten. So naturally, he taught me how to drive. And it went pretty well. It was in like this little 06, I want to say, Chevy HHR. And I feel like I did pretty well. I passed my driver's test first time. If I would have missed one more point, though, I probably wouldn't have passed. But I did pass. And he kept saying I had a lead foot, which I thought was kind of ironic since he had taken me to the 500 twice when I was younger. Like, I learned from the best. Don't know what else he was expecting. So, well, he did teach me how to drive. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to see me turned 25 this year. And I have a feeling it might be because he was scared to see what kind of car I could rent now that I could rent cars and what the lead foot would really do. So, but I know he was very proud to show off that moment in my life and teaching me how to drive. And he was so proud to post that photo and the smile on his face. And he liked it so much, he cropped me out of it and made it his Facebook profile picture for a while. I'm happy I could make him smile. Would have liked to be in it, but you know. But besides teaching me how to drive like a race car driver and like a normal individual, my grandfather also helped me find my true passion and calling in this world within art and photography. This is when, bear with me. And while it may have taken me a minute to connect the dots, I've changed my major a few times. My grandfather teaching me photography at age 7 and up. I remember going to get Abby, and I had my first little point and shoot camera. He's like, Katie, no. You gotta do it like this. And I'm like, okay. I still have that camera somewhere. And sharing his love of art and showing me art museums and all this art, and encouraged me, as you guys have said, like through when I created art and whenever I'd have anything showcased, he was so proud to go. Even though it's like in this rinky-dink furniture store in Gilbert, he's like, no, this is so cool. And I'm like, okay. And it did help me discover that I do want to have a career in this field within graphic design, some more a modern version of art. And I'm sad to say he won't see me graduate physically, but I know he'll be very proud of the career I'll lead eventually. And I want to thank my mom. Hi. For giving me the opportunity to do as much as I did for the service, from designing and planning it, or as my grandfather would say, being Miss Bossy Pants. So that way I could honor him in a way I felt was true to me, and a way I know he'd appreciate from things he had taught me and seeing how I took it out into the world. And on the topic of how much he loved art and everything, I do want to let everyone know that the impact they made on him was so big. And no matter if he was your teacher, friend, colleague, or family member, I know that everybody in this room meant something to him. And I know he's very proud of everybody, especially his grandkids, and he would love to share it on his favorite platform, as we know, Facebook. And even though he shared our lives, he shared your lives with us. And he shared, I was telling some people in the beginning, talked about everyone, we forgot your names, so we're very sorry if we don't remember your names, but he's definitely told us all these stories, minus stapler in the pants. I'm seeing now he pick and chose what he wanted to share with us. So, and he told us this all the time, and as I was talking to my own dad, who's back home in Arizona, I was like, I don't know what to say. Like, I want to say something, but I don't know. And he was like, you should let everyone know, like, all the stories he would tell. And he remembered a time when he was dating my mom, and it was like their first few months of dating, and he's like, Steve just went on and on about all his students. He goes, I don't even know who it was, but he just had all this joy and proudness in his voice for what he did at Sarah Scott. And so I just wanted to let you all know. But lastly, I want to share the story of the song we're about to hear as soon as I'm done speaking. So it's a song, I can't remember who did like the little like thing up here, but I really want to do that right now to like recenter myself. But it's a song that my grandfather told me he'd like played when I was like 10 or 12 years old. We were out at the pool in our neighborhood on a hot Arizona day, and I don't know what circumstances, if he heard it or came to his mind, but he had expressed that he loved this song, and he wanted it played when he passes. And he would randomly remind me through the next few years, like we'd be getting McDonald's and he'd come on, he's like, remember Katie, this is the song, this one, this version too. He's very particular. Glad it's been throughout the years he's been particular. And it's something I held close to my heart throughout till today. But I knew it's a way he wants us to honor him. So I want you all to know that when you listen to the song, it was close to his, and I hope it can be close to yours. And it was slightly significant because the name Over the Rainbow reminded him of the Rainbow Bridge that all his dogs passed over, which I hope he gets reunited with. And I have a dog of my own at home, and if he gets reunited with them, I don't know how he's going to handle them all at once. So good luck. But I hope he gets to feel that love and companionship with him again. And before we play the song, I want to leave you with a quote by Miley Cyrus, which, in case you didn't know, he is convinced I look like her. Like, till the day he died. Like, a month before everything happened and he met Hannah, he goes, you know, doesn't she kind of look like Miley Cyrus? And we're like, okay, cool, yay. And it's a show we watched together, the Hannah Montana show, quite a bit when I was growing up because I wanted to be a rock star for a minute. But the quote I'll share is, you'll always find your way back home. And I feel like it's fitting because we all found our way to Terre Haute. And on behalf of myself and my family, I'm glad we all got to experience celebrating my grandfather and able to come back to Terre Haute, his true home. But we love you, Papa.
lemon drops high